Hello everybody, welcome back to Wolfeei. Today we're going to be reviewing your opinions on Minecraft events. Like a few events ago, videos ago, the most recent one and the one before that, I asked for your feedback on your favorite events, your favorite games from each event, etc. And today we're going to look at the results, kind of see, hey, what's up with what you guys think. I usually share my opinion, now we get to see your opinion, and I share my opinion about your opinion. I have also collected the stuff before. I collected this like an hour or two ago, so there's a few responses that came in, but as you can see, 300 people responded, roughly, a little bit more, but yeah. Today we're going to look at the results of everything, see if there's anything interesting to look at that stands out, and otherwise, let's just get straight into it. So first off, I had some general questions that kind of applied to just events in general rather than just specific events. Starting with, what is your favorite finale game? And unsurprisingly, this is an absolute wash. Dodgeball stands out as by far the most favorite finale, according to a lot of people, including you guys. And then coming in second and third is Blockwars with Shockwave, the current finale, and then Rock, Paper, Scissors, the finale from Blockwars Chaos. Then follows Colosseum from PB, Colosseum and Bridges from Block Wars are tied, then Hungry Hoglin, then Turf Wars, and then Showdown from Minecraft Mayhem, which makes sense. These results aren't super surprising. I think the reason why Colosseum falls slightly behind is maybe because it is similar to other event games across the scene. Also, I will admit, and this is a thing that will apply to some of these things, I only asked for the favorite. We don't know the second favorite from all 200 plus people that voted for Dodgebolt, right? So for all we know, half of these people would say Colosseum is their second favorite, and then Colosseum would be number two. I didn't really think it was going to be that relevant to get all the info. So here's somewhat of an accurate summary of what people seem to prefer, I guess. Next up, which events player roster is your favorite? Where Block Wars stands out as number one by a decent gap, with both PB and MCC coming relatively close in second. They're within 2 votes of each other. What is interesting is that I did expect initially the MCC audience to really want to vote for their roster with the Hermits, etc. But it turns out that people very slightly prefer the PB roster over the MCC one. As of what we know here, at least, there's again, same thing. Didn't ask for second favorite, third favorite. So there's a chance that 120 Blockwars voters, maybe 80 of them would vote for MCC and 40 for PB. Who knows, right? We have no clue. But it is interesting to see these results. I'm not surprised that Blockwars is number one. Obviously, there's going to be some bias from just people being in my audience. But also, I do think Block Wars has the most effort put into making a roster that's a bit more special, a bit more unique, and it seems to work to an extent, at least. Next up, I asked people to rank these 5 events in order from best to worst, and it's not surprising that the results are pretty much consistent, right? MCC most commonly was voted best, and then it's trickles down for sometimes some people think it's the second best, like a fourth roughly of the people who responded think it's the second best event rather than the first, and then etc. etc. Then you look at Block Wars, where most commonly it's voted second best, but it also is considered best and sometimes third best, and then the other two. PB is most commonly considered third best, but it actually has pretty even placements for best, second best, and fourth best, which is interesting. I do think PB falling in fourth slightly more commonly might have to just do with Biome Battle, because if you look at Biome Battle, most commonly it is considered the 4th best event. However, to an extent, I am very surprised that the second most voted option is Biome Battle being the worst. Maybe that is because people are less familiar with it. Maybe it's recency bias. Maybe people just don't really like it that much. But I would have really expected Biome Battle to maybe have a little bit more consistency in votes for the top 3. This could also just be sample size issue where obviously 300 people responding doesn't represent the entire community. Maybe there's a specific group of people that responded to this that maybe just don't favor Biome Battle. And then finally, the most agreed upon thing is not that MCC is the best, it is that Mayhem's the worst, which is interesting. But that is the results. So that's your ranking. Mayhem is most confidently voted to be the number 5. Then MCC most confidently voted number 1. Then Biome Battle number 4. Then blockwars number 2. Then PB number 3, which is interesting. I'm not super surprised at these results. I did think that there was a chance that maybe with recency bias included, Biome Battle was going to get higher results, but I don't think this fully reflects exactly how this works. Again, because we're asking for number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You gotta rank them somehow. Sometimes people will be like, well, MCC is my favorite, but like I don't really care to pick between the other 3, so they just kind of do whatever, right? Or other way around. So that's how I view this result. Now to go a little bit more quickly through the rest, I made event-specific sections asking for games, where obviously we start with MCC, and the favorite MCC game is set. 100 people out of 300 voted for SOT to be their number 1. Second is a Meltdown with not even half of those votes, which does show that SOT is the standout best MCC game, according to at least a pretty consistent record that we're seeing here. This is not super surprising. We've seen this over time, that SOT is widely considered not just the best from MCC, but the best Minecraft event game, and I don't disagree. I think it's definitely up there, for sure, right? It has to be up there. It's not like 100 people are just delusional. No, this is fairly accurate. It is interesting to see the results for the rest of number 1 favorite, Meltdown obviously being second. I didn't really expect this, but I guess in retrospect it might not be too surprising that Meltdown is considered considered that good. Maybe some people really like Meltdown. Maybe the combat's cool. I think Meltdown's really cool. I can't really comment on it because it's almost the only MCC game. It might just be the only MCC game I've literally never played, even in testing. So I can't really comment on the gameplay experience, but it looks really cool, so I understand it. Sky Battle being in third, not super surprising. It is a staple for MCC, and then Ace Race and Rocket Spleef being the 4th and 5th option. No, Grid Owners actually has more votes than Rocket Spleef, my bad. By 1, which is interesting. But that's where we have the other sections for, which is where the results seem to change a little bit, which is interesting. Second most favorite, SOT still wins, but it's just showing that SOT is very popular. Ace Race actually comes in clutch here. Meltdown also coming in as well. Then if we look for the rest, Battle Box also starting to make a push here. For the rest, third favorite, relatively well split, honestly. I mean, the biggest portion is Ace Race with 13%, which is pretty good. It shows that there's a good amount of consistency for MCC to work with in terms of what they're offering. Then we look at least favorites, where, not super surprising. Survival games is the least favorite, and then follows Build Mart, which historically speaking makes sense. Then To Get Your Side, which I don't know if that's my influence, but I'm not super surprised from my personal opinions to see it up there. And then Bingo makes sense. It's pretty standard. And Parkour Tag, which I'm a little surprised at. Maybe these are just 27 players that are voting for it, but I don't know. I mean, Parkour Tag seems cool. I guess it's kind of mid to an extent, right? I feel like Parkour Tag doesn't really stand out as like best MCC game, so that makes sense. Moving along though, we have Block Wars, where the results are somewhat interesting. In my opinion, I think it's funny. One thing that is funny is Lunge got 1 vote. It was not me, by the way. I didn't do this poll. 1 vote for Lunge, which is pretty funny. But we have Blitz Hunt at number 1 by not that crazy of a gap, which I'm slightly surprised by, but maybe not that much, because I guess there is also the opportunity, or the chance at least, that a good amount of people that responded to this are maybe more competitive leaning, or maybe if you have a specific POV you watch and they haven't had a great Blitz Hunt POV, that could also be a factor, right? But Blitz Hunt is the number 1 here, with Extraction coming in second, and Order Up here being number 3, then Party and Trailblazers, and then furthermore we have number 2 favorite, where Blitz Hunt, Extraction, Party, Order Up, Trailblazers, which seems, the big 5 of Block Wars, I guess, are being represented. And then we look at number 3 favorite, and it's Extraction, Party, Trailblazers, Order Up, Blitz Hunt. But Construction comes in close, at least, and Battle comes in somewhat close as well, at least, and Race actually comes in pretty close as well, at least, which is interesting. I think that's cool. But then we go to the least favorite games. And this also doesn't really surprise me too much. Tomb Titans being number 1 makes sense. Lunge makes sense to a good amount of extent. Overspleef makes sense. There's a lot of commonality, I think, here that we can we can kind of understand the origin of some of these responses, especially with Overspleef and Lunge. And then Order Up and Battle also being down here makes sense. I mean, this is not super surprising. It is interesting to see that Order Up is a game, so far the only game that's like top 5 least favorites, which obviously there's only 2 sections, but top 5 least favorite, but also top 5 favorites, which is peculiar. We're going to see another one of those very soon. Next up is PB, where this one is a little silly maybe because I included Dragon Pit because I think it's fair to include a Dragon Pit. Also, I will say I did accidentally, for like 24 hours of this video being up, or this poll being up, forget to include Trials of Fire and Voidbound, which does skew the results a little bit. I'm sure there's like 100, maybe 200 people who didn't really get to respond to these two being included, which is my bad. So the results are not super accurate. For all we know, people might love Trials of Fire more than we see here, but regardless. Dragon Pit Hades Havoc is number 1, which is not surprising, but it is a tricky one to really gauge in terms of how actually how highly appreciated the game is, because it's a one-time occurrence. We don't know if with multiple times of the game being played, the game would be maybe more or less well received. Though Chalice Chase and Temple Lockout, I do think are the 2 standout games from PB's regular roster, at least. It makes sense that they are up here as well. We see this furthermore as well with Temple being the second most favorite, and then Chalice, and then Jumping Mad, to my surprise at least, being very high. I did not think people really, vibed with parkour that much, but apparently they do. And then a decent split across for the rest. Trials and Minor Mania also making an appearance here. Third favorite, though, is where things shake up slightly, maybe, at least, where Minor Mania actually is the most common answer here. Chalice Chase also coming into play. You see Temple, you see Trials of Fire, Jumping Mad, Hyperdrive, Gauntlet. Pretty decent spread. Voidbound does appear here a little bit more, but most notably is SG being the least favorite PB game, according to this poll. Maybe it's just SG in general being not as much appreciated, but it is surprising that it is the highest, I think. I would have expected Voidbound to take the cake, but that could have also just been because I forgot to include it. So maybe Voidbound would have been number 1. Hyperdrive, though, being the second entry of a game that, as much as not like top 5 consistently, it has gotten a lot of votes in terms of favorites, especially here. And it also is number 2 here in terms of least favorite game, which I am a little surprised by. I thought Hyperdrive was a bit more popular, but maybe that is due to the player base and not mostly due to the viewer base. That could be a big factor. Next up, Biome Battle, which is an interesting one because Biome Battle is such a fresh event, especially with the games constantly changing. There is very little to really hold on to in terms of what is preferred. But it does show that with some freshness comes some, more spread out opinions, because the number 1 voted game was only 15% of the poll, with the least voted for game still being voted for 11 times being Farming Frenzy. So you kind of get a more evenly spread graph across the board. However, Oppenslimer wins this poll with Runner's Rampage coming in second. I actually think that this result might be different than it was when I initially did this, but we'll see in a little bit. Runner's Rampage, Cosmic Construction, and Zap and Cap being tied. Sky Spleef coming in 5th, but then we look at second favorite, and we see that Cosmic Construction gets a lot more rep. Then we see Oppenslimer, and then we see Runner's Rampage again, Zap and Cap again, Sky Spleef coming in again, but Dungeon Dash coming in close. But then we look at third favorite game, and we kind of see a bit more of a repetition, where it's Zap and Cap, you see Oppenslimer, you see Cosmic Construction, you see Sky Spleef, and then you see a tie with a Runner's Rampage, Task Tag, and then, interesting. It's somewhat consistent, kind of surprising, because of how new the event is. I thought there would be more diverse opinions, but no, apparently not. Then we look at least favorite game. Farming Frenzy makes sense to be the standout here. It seems to be a game that doesn't really have that well of a defined objective, and I think people take issue with that. Arena being in second, though, I'm not super sure why that is the case. I think Arena has similarities with Battle, so maybe that's some overlap in terms of the negative feedback, but maybe not. But then you also see Sprint here, makes sense. Oppenslimer, and then also Sky Spleef. I'll probably also allow people to look at the responses if I can on this graph if you want to look at things in a bit more detail. I just remembered maybe you want to see the full detail of the responses. And maybe for event hosts could be interesting as well. Also, one thing that is important to note is in this section with 310 total responses, we lost 50 people. So some people tuned out after the major events were voted for. Finally, though, Minecraft Mayhem, where this one is tricky because I think Mayhem is one of the prime examples where the most favorite games are very big standouts and the rest kind of falls behind. Though we see an interesting result. Factory Frenzy, being the number one makes sense. Multi-Spleef coming in second. Rapid Racers being in third does add up to a good amount of extent. Guardians of the Chamber being fourth, and then I think it's tied. No, Elytra Race is fifth, which is interesting. I mean, I guess Hyperdrive similarity, right? Makes sense. Second favorite, Multi-Spleef. Makes sense, right? A lot of the Factory Frenzy people would probably vote for Multi-Spleef. A lot of the Multi-Spleef people would probably vote for Factory Frenzy. Rapid Racers makes sense. Then Ballistic Bingo coming in fourth. Did not think people, effed with the bingo that much, but clearly they do. To an extent at least, 28 people. And then Guardians of the Chamber up next, although... No, Checkpoint Champion's higher. I don't know why Google is showing Guardians of the Chamber with a percentage, but not Checkpoint Champion. Checkpoint Champion is actually number 5, which showcases there is a viewer base for parkour. Number 3 favorite game, is very well spread, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. The standout here is Guardians of the Chamber being the number 3. Then we have super close numbers. Rapid Racers with 13.8%. Then we have 11, 12, 11, 10%, all for the rest of the games, with Sky Skirmish coming in last, which makes sense. There's a lot of Sky games. It is probably the weakest contender within that, conglomerate of Sky games, so it makes sense. And then finally, least favorite games, Bingo, being the number 1, which is funny considering it was top 5 here, but Bingo, and then we have Sky Skirmish. Combat Cube, which I don't think is actually in the event anymore, so that makes sense. And then Elytra Race, which, considering there was Hyperdrive, disliking, makes sense. And then Guardians of the Chamber. For the rest, it is a pretty well spread. Finally, this was a section where I was just curious about which party games and gauntlet games people like the most, and this won't be included in the final results fully because neither party nor gauntlet made it into the top games for each event, so they won't get represented in the full roster. However, we can look at the results for fun. Rank your favorite blockwars party games. The pretty much undisputed number 1 is Beep Test, which makes sense. Funnily enough, the undisputed number 6 is Heist, which isn't very surprising. I think from the results here, Photon does seem to be the second favorite most commonly, at least, yeah, if we tally up the votes there. That is the most commonly voted for number 2. I think Splat probably ends up in number 3, but it's kind of hard to tell. I think these are mostly spread. It's just a definitive mid result from Crossfire, Go Down, and Splat, which is interesting. Mostly because a lot of that first game slot goes to Beep Test, right? Because it's so standout. So these are pretty well spread out, I think. Crossfire seems to be like meh all across the board. Go Down, meh across the board. And Splat, meh across the board. I think Splat would probably be number 3. And then if I had to pick here, probably Crossfire number 4 and then Go Down number 5. As much as Go Down has more number 4 votes and more number 5 votes, more number 4 votes, it also does have more number 5 votes, and Crossfire has a bit more number 2 and number 3 votes in its favor, so that does help. So that's probably the result there. Then we look at Gauntlet, which had a few more contenders to be voted for, considering Dragon Pit had some custom inclusions. There's an interesting result here. There's 3 standout games from PB in Gauntlet that seem to be the favorites. At least they are most commonly voted for in the higher numbers, which is Mini Disco Fever, Sand Surfers, and Sheer Mayhem, which makes sense, I think. Mini Disco Fever adds up. That used to be a full game. I think it has a slightly better spot in Gauntlet, so that makes sense. Sheer Mayhem is my favorite, and I do think a lot of people think it's funny. And it is funny and competitive. It's a really well-designed game, I think, especially for Gauntlet. Sand Surfers, I think, is just super iconic for Gauntlet. I don't even think Sand Surfers is necessarily like that great of a game mode. I don't think it's bad. I just think it's like, all right. But it seems to be pretty popular. Maybe it's because it's so iconic, or maybe people just really do enjoy watching it. There is a level of intensity to it, I guess, right? Because you never really know when things could go wrong. You could see a player maybe clutch up with a little bit of parkour. It is interesting. Then the rest of the results are a little surprising. I mean, okay, Shepherds being the least favorite doesn't really surprise me that much. However, the rest of the results are kind of spread across the board. It does seem like Speed Sculptures or Icebreakers. It's probably Speed Sculptures is number 4, which is the ice construction type of game mode. Then Icebreakers, which is Spleef with ice, is number 5. And then we get TNT Run, and then Hoarders from Dragon Pit, or maybe Obstacles is thrown in there. Maybe Obstacles is actually slightly higher voted for than TNT Run. It does seem to maybe be that case. I don't really know for sure, though. It's kind of hard to really tell from the stats we have in front of us here. But it's either TNT Run or Obstacles for number 5 or 6. And then let's just call it tied 5th, which then means, or 6th, I think, whatever. 8th would be Hoarders, and then 9th would be Shepherds. That's the results from this poll that I did. These are the notes I took. Finale, Dodgeball's not even close. Roster would be Block Wars. This is what people want to see the most. There's very few surprising results, although Jumping Mad was favored for PB to be in the top 5 over Hyperdrive, because Hyperdrive does have a top 3 least favorite games appearance, and then the rest are pretty much expected results, which gives this as the final result that we are dealing with. I tried my best to give every event at least 2 inclusions, where the favorite event overall results had an impact on how many games from each event are included. So with MCC being most commonly the number 1 favorite, they for sure needed to have 3 games included, with the bonus of Dodgeball, I guess. So 3.5 games included in this conglomerate most favorite roster from your guys' opinions. So that's what we see here. This top row is the main selection for this combined event, with the second row, I'll get into it, kind of be in the backups, right? I tried to really stick to the script and be a little bit more strict in terms of what we included, but I'll explain in a little bit. So MCC got 3.5 inclusions because it is the number 1. Then Blockers being number 2 and PB being number 3. I think both deserve 3 game inclusions, in which Blockers gets Blitz Hunt, Extraction, and Order Up, and then PB got I just grabbed the top 3, right? So the top 3 was Extraction, Blitz Hunt, and Order Up from votes, and then Hades Havoc, Temple, and Chalice for PB. However, because Order Up was the 3rd most voted for, with Blitz Hunt and Extraction being the top voted for, Order Up is on the bench, would be considered a game that could be cycled in and out with other games if this were to be a multi-appearance event. Similar, I guess, with PB. It's kind of hard to tell. If this is like a multi-appearance event, you would have Hades Havoc on the bench because of how unique it is in its format. If there's a special occurrence, Hades Havoc would for sure be included, because it is one of the more popular voted for games, not just in PB but across all the polls. Then finally we have Biome Battle and Mayhem, which were obviously 4th and 5th. I do think with Mayhem specifically being 5th, they had 2 standout games. Both of them should be included, which then left Biome Battle also with 2 inclusions. I picked one from each because I think with the games that were voted for, there is an argument to be had for things being swapped in and out. In Biome Battle and Mayhem's combined case, they both had their building game in the top 2 games from their respective votes. I decided that Factory Frenzy being a little bit more standout voted for meant that Cosmic Construction would be a similar role of being subbed in and out if this were to happen multiple times. And then Oppenslimer was the most voted for game from Biome Battle. So that results in a roster that has how many team games? It has SOT as a team game. It has Factory Frenzy as like a team miscellaneous game. So that's 2 team games. It has 1, 2, 3 proper PvP games. It has 1 and 2 movement games, in which Chalice Chase is like a hybrid movement and team game, right? But I would consider it mainly a movement game. And then Blitz Hunt and Oppenslimer being the miscellaneous category, which makes sense. And then Dodgebolt obviously being the finale, with the bench having 3 team-oriented games and then 1 miscellaneous game. Makes sense. I mean, maybe you could have an argument for, with a blockwars roster, there should probably be less PvP, in which you could take out Meltdown probably, because it is 4 MCC games currently in the pool of games, in which I don't really know what you would include. You could do multi-split, you could do order up. Would probably make the most sense for either of those to be in consideration if you were to do, blockwars roster. But we'll see. Well, actually, we won't see. This is not real, but this is the results. Let me know your thoughts on what you guys voted for. And maybe we'll do this again at the end of the year if things shake up enough, because it is interesting to see what the people, what the people's opinion looks like, especially combined, because we see different results from different people. Anyways, thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Goodbye.